The autumn air bit at Lily Morgan's cheeks as she stumbled along the deserted country road, her breath forming small clouds that dissolved into the twilight. The strap of her backpack cut into her shoulder, a constant reminder of how far she still had to walk to reach Grandma Martha's cottage. She had never expected the bus to break down, leaving her stranded at the Pine Creek Junction with miles of lonely road ahead. Twilight was rapidly surrendering to darkness. The dense forest pressed close on the either side of the gravel path, ancient trees standing sentinel like silent watchers. In the fading light, their branches resembled gnarled fingers reaching toward the narrow strip of darkening sky above. Lily pulled her woolen coat tighter, trying to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. The approaching rumble of an engine broke the silence. At first, Lily felt relief flood through her. Perhaps someone who could offer a ride shortened her journey to the safety of her grandmother's home. But as headlights cut through the gathering gloom behind her, instinct made her step further to the roadside. The vehicle, a dark sedan with a cracked windshield, slowed as it drew alongside her. The passenger window rolled down, releasing the sour stench of alcohol and cigarettes. "Churnin' in and need a ride, little girl." The driver's voice was thick and slurred, his smile all wrong beneath the shadow of his baseball cap. A second man leaned across from the passenger seat, his eyes glittering with an intent that made Lily's skin crawl. "It's getting awful dark out here. Dangerous for a kid to be walking alone." "No, thank you." Lily managed her 10-year-old voice, barely a whisper, as she clutched her backpack straps tighter. "My grandmother's expecting me. She lives just around the bend." "Well, we'd better not keep her waiting then." The passenger door swung open with a metallic groan. Before Lily could react, a rough hand clamped around her wrist, pulling her toward the vehicle. Her scream tore through the still forest air, startling a flock of crows from a nearby tree. Their black shapes scattered across the darkening sky as Lily was dragged into the sedan. The tires spun gravel as they veered off the main road onto an old logging trail, branches scraping against the windows like desperate fingernails. Lily pressed herself against the door as far as possible from the men whose names she now heard, Roy and Dale, as they argued about which way to go. "Just far enough that no one hears her." Roy muttered, navigating the rutted path with one hand on the wheel, the other clutching a half-empty bottle. Minutes later, the car jerked to a halt in a small clearing. Lily was roughly pulled from the back seat and thrown to her knees on the damp forest floor. Tears streamed silently down her face as Dale rummaged through her backpack, tossing aside her books and the carefully wrapped sandwiches Grandma Martha had prepared for her journey. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling, "just let me go." A twig snapped in the dense forest behind them. Then another. Both men turned toward the sound, Dale dropping her backpack as Roy fumbled for something beneath his seat. Lily saw at first a flash of silver-gray fur between the trees, and then the gleam of amber eyes reflecting the sedan's headlights. A low rumbling growl rose from the shadows, sending a chill through the clearing that had nothing to do with the autumn air. The growl deepened, joined by another from a different direction. Something large moved through the underbrush, circling the clearing with deliberate steps. Roy cursed, finally extracting a hunting knife from beneath the driver's seat. "What the hell is that?" he hissed, alcohol-induced bravado wavering in his voice. Lily remained frozen, her gaze fixed on the amber eyes that now seemed to be watching her specifically. There was an intelligence in that gaze, a presence that felt strangely familiar, though she had never seen a wolf before, except in picture books. Somehow she knew with absolute certainty that this creature meant her no harm. Dale backed toward the car. "Man, let's get out of here. This ain't worth it." The brush parted and the wolf stepped fully into the clearing. A magnificent creature with silver-gray fur that shimmered in the fading light. Its massive head held high as it assessed the scene before it. It was not alone behind. It emerged a second wolf, darker in coloration, but equally imposing. Then a third. The pack had encircled the clearing, cutting off escape to the vehicle. Roy's knife clattered to the ground as he backed away. Hands raised. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. What happened next occurred so quickly that Lily would later struggle to describe it. The lead wolf lunged forward with explosive speed, its teeth bared in a snarl aimed directly at Roy. The man screamed, stumbling backward and falling to the ground. But the wolf stopped short, snapping its jaws inches from his face, a warning, not an attack. The other wolves closed in, herding the men away from Lily. With strategic movements that seemed almost choreographed, Dale bolted for the car, Roy scrambling after him. The engine roared to life, tires spinning wildly as the sedan reversed down the logging path, branches snapping against its windows. And then they were gone, leaving Lily alone in the clearing with the wolves. Trembling, she remained kneeling on the forest floor, uncertain what would happen next. The lead wolf approached her slowly, its earlier aggression replaced by a measured gentleness. It stopped an arm's length away, amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. Then, to Lily's astonishment, it lowered its great head and nudged her hand much as a dog might seek affection. "Thank you," she whispered instinctively, raising her fingers to touch the coarse fur of its muzzle. The wolf's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. It held her gaze for one more moment before turning toward the forest, pausing to look back at her with what seemed like expectation. The message was unmistakable: follow me. Rising on unsteady legs, Lily gathered her scattered belongings and placed them back in her backpack. With one final glance at the empty logging road, she stepped toward the waiting wolf. "Please," she said softly, "I need to get to my grandmother's cottage on Old Mill Road." As if it understood perfectly, the wolf led her through the forest, choosing paths invisible to her human eyes, but that somehow within minutes connected to a trail she recognized. The other wolves had melted back into the darkness, but her silver-gray guide remained patiently waiting whenever she slowed, selecting the easiest route when multiple paths presented themselves. When the lights of Martha Calloway's cottage finally came into view through the trees, Lily felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. The wolf stopped at the edge of the clearing, sitting back on his haunches as Lily stepped out from the forest edge. "Lily!" Her grandmother's voice carried across the yard as the cottage door flew open, spilling warm light onto the porch. Martha Calloway stood silhouetted in the doorway, her tall figure unmistakable even in the darkness. "Child, where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." Lily turned to thank her wilderness guide, but the wolf had already retreated, only the gleam of those amber eyes visible between the trees before they too disappeared. Later, she would tell her grandmother about the men, the car, and her unlikely savior. But in that moment, all she could think was that something extraordinary had happened. Something that felt less like chance and more like destiny. What Lily couldn't have known then was how profoundly that encounter would change her life, or that the wolf with amber eyes would return to her in ways she could never have imagined. The ancient bond between the Calloway women and the forest had awakened once more, and nothing would ever be the same. Life in Lily Morgan's cramped two-bedroom apartment in Portland had become a carefully choreographed routine of absence. Her mother, Sarah, worked double shifts at St. Joseph's Hospital, her nursing scrubs often bearing the faint antiseptic smell that had become the background scent of their home. Lily had learned to cook simple meals, to do her homework without supervision, to pretend she didn't mind the crushing loneliness that had settled over their lives since her father's death from cancer 3 years ago. School provided little respite. At 10 years old, Lily was already an outsider, too quiet, too thoughtful, too prone to daydreaming during lessons. Her clothes came mostly from thrift stores, carefully selected by her mother to look nearly new. But the other fifth graders could always tell the difference. The carefully maintained Nike sneakers and Justice tops that populated her classroom made Lily's hand-me-downs seem like costumes from another era. Books became her sanctuary. The school librarian, Mrs. Winters, had taken a special interest in her, setting aside new arrivals about animals and wilderness adventures. Lily devoured them all, particularly stories about wolves, which had fascinated her since she was small. Her father had encouraged this interest, once taking her to a wolf conservation center during a camping trip. The memory of his voice, "Look how they work together, Lily Flower, like a perfect team," was one she revisited often, a comfort worn smooth, like a river stone from frequent handling. Sarah Morgan did her best, but grief had hollowed her out, leaving a functional shell that moved through the necessary motions of parenthood without the warmth that had once defined her. The rare glimpses of her former self, a spontaneous hug, a shared laugh over a television show made her usual emotional absence all the more painful. On the worst days, Lily would catch her mother staring at old photographs, fingers tracing the outline of her husband's face, with a tenderness she rarely displayed toward the living. "Mom," Lily asked one evening in early May, watching her mother sort through bills at the kitchen table, her forehead creased with the familiar worry lines that monetary concerns always brought. "Did Grandma Martha call about me visiting this summer?" Sarah looked up, momentarily disoriented, as if pulled from deep thought. "Oh, yes, she did. I told her you'd take the bus up after Memorial Day weekend." She hesitated, setting down her pen. "Are you sure you want to spend the whole summer there again? It's so isolated and there aren't any children your age nearby." "I like it there," Lily said, simply unwilling to articulate exactly why her grandmother's cottage felt more like home than their apartment ever could. How could she explain that Martha's quiet woods offered more companionship than the crowded, lonely hallways of Westridge Elementary? Or that the absence of modern distractions felt like freedom rather than deprivation? Sarah sighed, tucking a strand of prematurely graying hair behind her ear. "I know you do, and it does help with childcare while school's out." The practical consideration, unspoken, but hovering between them, that Martha charged nothing for Lily's extended stays, saving them the considerable expense of summer camps or babysitters. "I just worry about all those wild animals and Martha getting older. She's nearly 70 now." "Grandma's strong," Lily countered. "Remember last summer when she chopped all that firewood herself? And she says the animals won't hurt me if I respect their space." A shadow crossed Sarah's face, the same expression she wore whenever Martha's more unconventional views on nature arose. "Just promise you'll be careful. Stay close to the cottage and don't go wandering in those woods alone." Lily nodded agreement, though in truth, wandering those woods was precisely what she most anticipated. There was a freedom at Martha's that existed nowhere else in her life, the freedom to explore, to observe, to simply be without the constant pressure to fit into spaces too narrow for her spirit. The Greyhound bus that would carry her to Pine Creek departed from Portland Central Station on the last Monday of May, memorial wreaths still adorning the terminal from the previous day's holiday observances. Sarah had taken a rare morning off to see her daughter onto the bus, her goodbye hug lingering a moment longer than usual. "Call when you arrive," she instructed, handing Lily a small envelope containing emergency money and the calling card she would need to use the payphone at Pine Creek's general store. "And tell your grandmother not to let you run wild this year. You're getting older now, it's time to be more careful." "Careful." Lily nodded, dutifully accepting the envelope and her mother's concerns with equal solemnity. "I will love you, Mom." As the bus pulled away from the station, Lily watched her mother's figure grow smaller through the smudged window, noting how Sarah stood perfectly still until the bus turned the corner, a slender sentinel in pale blue scrubs. Something in her posture, a rigidity that spoke of effort rather than strength, made Lily's throat tighten with a familiar guilt. Was it wrong to feel such relief at leaving, to count down the days until summer, while her mother counted down the hours of double shifts? The journey north took nearly 5 hours, the landscape outside her window transforming gradually from urban sprawl to farmland to increasingly dense forest. Lily spent most of the trip with her nose pressed to the glass, watching for deer or eagles in the woods that bordered the highway. When the bus finally wheezed to a stop at Pine Creek's single-pump gas station, which doubled as the town's Greyhound depot, her heart leapt at the sight of a familiar blue pickup truck parked nearby. Martha Calloway stood beside it, her tall frame still straight, despite her years' silver-white hair braided and wound in a coronet around her head. She wore her usual attire, faded jeans, a flannel shirt with rolled sleeves revealing sinewy forearms, and sturdy boots that had weathered countless seasons. As Lily descended the bus steps, Martha's weathered face broke into a smile that transformed her serious countenance into something luminous. "There's my girl," she called, opening her arms wide. Lily flew into her grandmother's embrace, burying her face in the soft flannel that smelled of wood smoke garden soil and the distinctive herbs Martha grew for her, tinctures and teas. For the first time in months, the perpetual tightness in her chest eased. "I missed you, Grandma," she whispered, inhaling deeply. "I missed you too, Dandelion," Martha replied, using the nickname she'd bestowed when Lily was barely walking, stubborn and golden-haired. "Come on now, I've got a rabbit stew simmering at home and someone else who's been watching the road for you all morning." As they drove through Pine Creek's modest downtown, a stretch of buildings that included the general store post office diner and church, Martha caught Lily up on local news. Old Mr. Peterson had finally replaced his hip. The Millers had sold their farm to a young couple from California, and Pastor Robert remained locked in an ongoing battle of wits with the squirrels that invaded his church attic every spring. "And Thunder," Lily asked eagerly, referring to her grandmother's enormous gray tomcat, who had always shown a particular fondness for her, despite his generally aloof nature with most humans. Martha chuckled. "Imperious as ever, brought me a rabbit bigger than himself last week. Looked so proud. You'd think he'd hunted down a mountain lion." She glanced sideways at her granddaughter. "He's been sleeping on your bed these past few nights. I think he sensed you were coming." Lily smiled at the thought Thunder had appeared at Martha's cottage 7 years ago. A fully grown stray who had simply installed himself on her porch one autumn evening and refused to leave. Unlike most cats, he showed no interest in coming indoors, except during the coldest winter nights, preferring to patrol the property and surrounding woods with the territorial dedication of a much larger predator. His unusual size, nearly twice that of a normal house cat, and distinctive silver-gray coloration had inspired numerous theories among Pine Creek's residents, the most common being that he must have wildcat ancestry. The pickup turned onto Old Mill Road, leaving the sparse habitation of Pine Creek behind as it wound deeper into the forest. With each mile, the trees grew more ancient, their canopies creating a tunnel of dappled green light. Lily rolled down her window, breathing in the rich scent of moss pine and the subtle sweetness of wild honeysuckle that grew along the roadside. "How's your mother?" Martha asked after a comfortable silence, her tone carefully neutral. Lily considered the question, aware of the complicated history between her grandmother and mother. "She works a lot," she said finally. "The hospital added another weekend shift to her schedule last month." Martha nodded, her hands steady on the steering wheel. "Sarah always did believe in shouldering everything herself, too proud to ask for help even as a girl." There was both admiration and frustration in the statement. "And you how's school treating my brilliant granddaughter?" "It's okay." Lily shrugged, unwilling to burden her grandmother with tales of classroom isolation or the girls who whispered behind their hands when she wore the same sweater twice in 1 week. "I got an A on my science project about wolf pack dynamics. Did you now?" "Well, that doesn't surprise me one bit. You've got the Callaway eye for nature's patterns." Martha's voice held a pride that Lily rarely heard from her mother, who tended to focus more on practical concerns, homework completion, and adequate test scores than on Lily's genuine intellectual curiosities. The truck rounded a final bend, and Martha's cottage appeared nestled in a small clearing, its whitewashed walls and blue shutters glowing in the afternoon sunlight. A wraparound porch supported a riot of potted plants and hanging baskets. The steps lined with large stones Martha had collected from the nearby creek. Beyond the tidy vegetable garden, an herb bed stretched wild meadow that eventually yielded to the ancient forest. Lily spotted Thunder immediately, his massive form perched on the porch railing, like a silver gargoyle tail switching slowly as he watched their approach. But as Martha parked the truck, Lily noticed something unusual near the garden. Shed a small wooden enclosure that hadn't been there the previous summer. "Grandma, what's that?" she asked, pointing toward the new structure. Martha cut the engine, her hands resting momentarily on the steering wheel, before she turned to her granddaughter with an expression that combined excitement and something like caution. "That dandelion is a rather extraordinary development. Come see, but step quietly now." They approached the enclosure together, Thunder acknowledging their arrival with a regal nod, before leaping gracefully from his perch to join them. As they drew closer, Lily heard soft whimpering sounds from within the wooden pen. Thunder circled them once before positioning himself beside the structure, his yellow eyes fixed intently on whatever lay inside. When Lily peered over the edge, her breath caught in her throat. Curled on a bed of blankets lay what appeared to be a puppy, but one glance was enough to tell her this was no dog. Its fur was silver gray with darker markings along its back, its ears already pointed, despite its obvious youth. When it looked up at her approach, Lily found herself staring into brilliant amber eyes that triggered an immediate sense of recognition. "A wolf," she whispered, awestruck. "But how?" Martha placed a weathered hand on Lily's shoulder. "Thunder brought him home about 4 weeks ago. Found him half-starved in the East Ravine. Poor thing." Her voice hardened momentarily. "From the tracks I've found, his mother had been shot, probably by Frank Dawson, or one of those other fools who think killing predators makes them men." The edge in her tone softened as she continued. "He couldn't have been more than 6 weeks old then. Wouldn't have survived another day on his own." As they watched, Thunder approached the wolf pup, who immediately perked up, stubby tail wagging. To Lily's amazement, the cat slipped through the slats of the pen and began grooming the pup's head with long, deliberate strokes of his tongue. "I've never seen anything like it," Martha said, wonder evident in her voice. "Thunder's been mothering this little one since the day he brought him home. Hunts for him, cleans him, sleeps curled around him at night. I'd have said it was impossible if I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes." "Does he have a name?" Lily asked, unable to tear her gaze from the unlikely pair. "I've been calling him Little One. But he's your discovery now, too. You might have a better idea." Lily studied the pup thoughtfully. Though still small, there was something in those amber eyes that spoke of wild dignity and resilience. They reminded her of something or someone, but the memory danced just beyond her grasp. "Timber," she said finally. "His name is Timber." The name settled over the wolf pup like a mantle, fitting him perfectly. Martha nodded approval, and even Thunder seemed to acknowledge the christening with a slow blink of his yellow eyes. Watching Timber respond to the cat's attentions with puppy enthusiasm, Lily felt a connection forming a thread of recognition that defied logical explanation, but felt undeniably right. She hadn't told her grandmother about the wolves that rescued her the previous summer. Somehow the encounter had felt too personal, too mystical to share even with Martha, who was more open to nature's mysteries than anyone Lily knew. But now, looking at Timber's amber eyes, she wondered if the universe had sent her a sign she could no longer ignore. Over the next several days, Lily spent every waking moment with Timber and Thunder. Martha had fashioned a small harness for the wolf pup, so Lily could take him on supervised walks around the property, always with Thunder following close behind like an attentive guardian. To her delight, Timber responded to his new name immediately, his ears perking up whenever she called him. The harness had been Martha's one non-negotiable condition, a safety measure to prevent the young wolf from wandering too far while he learned the boundaries of his new home. "He's remarkably intelligent," Martha observed on the 4th morning as they watched Timber carefully mimic Thunder's hunting stance while stalking a butterfly. "Wolves always are, but this one seems special, even for his kind." Lily nodded, noticing how quickly Timber had learned to sit for treats and come when called. Already he seemed to understand the boundaries Martha had established, staying close to the cottage and never venturing past the old oak at the forest's edge without one of them accompanying him. "Will he have to go back to the wild?" Lily asked, voicing the fear that had been growing alongside her attachment to the pup. Martha was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant as she considered the question. "That's the way of things ordinarily," she said finally. "Wild creatures belong to themselves, not to us." She squeezed Lily's hand gently. "But there are exceptions to every rule, Dandelion. My own grandmother had a wolf that walked beside her for 15 years, never tamed, but choosing to stay. Let's just see how things unfold, shall we?" That evening, as shadows lengthened across the yard, Martha taught Lily an old song, one she claimed had been passed down through generations of Callaway women. The melody was haunting, almost like a wolf's howl translated into human voice. As they sang together on the porch steps, Timber raised his muzzle and joined in with a high-pitched puppy howl that made them both laugh. "That's it, little one." Martha encouraged, her voice warm with approval. "Find your voice." Later, as Lily lay in bed listening to the nighttime chorus of crickets and distant owls, she felt Thunder jump onto the mattress by her feet, as he did every night. But this time, there was a second lighter thump as Timber clambered up after him. Martha had been clear that Timber was to sleep in his special bed beside the fireplace, but Lily couldn't bring herself to send him away when he curled into a tight ball beside Thunder, both of them watching her with contented eyes. "Good night," she whispered to her unlikely guardians, feeling safer and more at home than she had in years. Just before sleep claimed her, Lily thought she heard her grandmother's soft chuckle from the doorway, but when she opened her eyes, there was only darkness and the gentle sound of Thunder's purr mingling with Timber's quiet breathing. By mid-June, Timber had grown at an astonishing rate. His gangly legs and oversized paws hinted at the formidable adult he would become, though his playful nature remained that of a puppy. Lily delighted in watching him explore Martha's property, always under the watchful eyes of herself and Thunder, who had taken on the role of mentor as much as protector. The young wolf learned quickly which plants to avoid, how to stalk field mice in the tall grass, when to freeze at Thunder's warning hiss. Martha often observed their interactions with a knowing smile, occasionally taking notes in a leather-bound journal she kept in her apron pocket. What are you writing?" Lily asked one afternoon, coming upon her grandmother, seated beneath the old oak tree pen, moving swiftly across the page. Martha looked up, squinting slightly in the dappled sunlight. "Family history," she said, patting the space beside her on the worn quilt she'd spread over the grass. "The Callaway women have always kept records of their observations. My grandmother's journals filled an entire shelf in her study. Observations of what." Lily settled beside her, watching Timber and Thunder play a complex game of chase among the wildflowers. In the natural world, mostly weather patterns, animal behaviors, plant cycles, things most folks don't bother to notice anymore. Martha closed her journal, her weathered finger marking her place. "Did you know that before weather forecasts and fancy technology, people relied on signs from nature to predict storms or early frosts? My grandmother could tell 3 days in advance when bad weather was coming just by watching how the birds behaved and which direction the leaves turned." Lily considered this, fascinated by the idea of understanding nature's language so fluently. "Could you teach me?" Martha's smile deepened, creasing the sun-weathered skin around her eyes. "I already am Dandelion. Every time we walk the property or tend the garden together, every time I show you which berries are safe and which to avoid." She reached out, tucking a strand of Lily's blonde hair behind her ear. "You have the gift I could tell from the time you were tiny. You see things other people miss." Before Lily could ask what she meant by the gift, Thunder's distinctive warning yell drew their attention. A truck was approaching on the gravel driveway, a mud-spattered pickup Lily didn't recognize. Martha stood quickly, brushing grass from her jeans. "That'll be Frank Dawson," she said, her voice cooling noticeably. "Take Timber inside quick now. No need for Frank to know what we're harboring." Lily scrambled to obey, calling Timber to her side and hurrying toward the cottage. Thunder remained on the porch. His yellow eyes narrowed to slits as he watched the approaching vehicle. From the safety of the front window, Lily observed a burly man with a perpetual sunburn exit, the truck rifle slung casually over one shoulder. His heavy-booted strides carried him directly toward Martha, who stood her ground at the edge of the garden, arms crossed over her chest. "Afternoon, Frank." Martha called, her voice pleasant but firm. "What brings you all the way out here?" The man stopped several paces away, his eyes darting toward Thunder and then scanning the property. "Word is you're harboring a wolf, Martha. A wild predator that has no business being near folks' homes or livestock. I'm caring for an orphaned pup whose mother was shot by poachers in protected forests. Martha corrected her posture, unyielding. And he's well contained on my property. Frank spat to one side, his expression darkening. Wolves are vermin. State should never have let them come back. They kill for sport. You know that. Found 3 of Bill Morgan's sheep last week. Throats torn out, but hardly eaten. That's what you're raising here. A killer. Lily felt Timber press against her leg as if sensing the tension outside. She placed a protective hand on his head, fingers buried in the thick fur that had grown luxurious under Martha's careful feeding. The accusation in Frank's voice made her stomach clench. How could anyone look at Timber and see only a killer? Through the window, she saw Martha's spine straighten even further, a sure sign she was restraining her temper. That will be quite enough, Frank Dawson. The wolf stays with me until he's old enough to fend for himself, and that's final. We'll see about that. Frank adjusted his rifle strap meaningfully. County's got laws about dangerous animals. Might be paying you another visit with Sheriff Miller soon. As he stomped back to his truck, Lily released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Martha remained motionless until Frank's truck disappeared down the drive, then turned toward the cottage with a concerned expression. When she entered, her eyes immediately sought Timber, who had retreated to his blanket by the fireplace. That man, Martha shook her head, her voice tight with barely contained anger. Always throwing his weight around, thinking his hunting rifle gives him authority over everything that breathes in these woods. He wants to hurt Timber, doesn't he? Lily asked, though she already knew the answer. Martha sighed, the anger in her features softening as she regarded her granddaughter. Some people fear what they don't understand, Dandelion, and fear makes them cruel. She crossed to the fireplace, kneeling with some effort to scratch behind Timber's ears. But don't you worry, Callaway women have been protecting these woods and their creatures for generations. Frank Dawson isn't the first bully we faced, and he won't be the last. That evening, Lily watched from the porch swing as her grandmother made a series of phone calls from the kitchen landline, the cottage's only concession to modern communication technology. Though she couldn't hear the exact words Martha's tone suggested, she was rallying allies, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of persuasive argument. When she finally joined Lily on the porch, a steaming mug of herbal tea in her hands, her expression was grimly satisfied. I've spoken with some friends on the county council, Martha explained, settling beside her granddaughter on the swing. There'll be a town meeting next week to discuss Timber's situation. Frank's stirring up concerns among the farmers, but we have supporters too. The news cast a shadow over the following days. Lily found herself watching the road anxiously whenever they ventured outside, and Timber seemed to absorb her wariness, staying closer to the cottage and responding with heightened attention to any unusual sounds. Only Thunder maintained his usual imperious demeanor, though Lily noticed he spent more time on high vantage points, his yellow eyes constantly surveying the property's perimeter. On the day of the town meeting, Martha dressed with unusual care, still in her customary jeans, but paired with a crisp blue button-down shirt that brought out the color of her eyes. She braided her silver hair more neatly than usual and added a small pair of turquoise earrings Lily had never seen before. First impressions matter when you're asking folks to overcome their fears, she explained when Lily commented on her appearance. Now let's go over what you might say if Sheriff Miller asked for your perspective. They rehearsed simple, clear statements about Timber's gentle nature and the progress he was making in learning boundaries. Martha emphasized the importance of acknowledging people's concerns while providing facts to counter misconceptions. Remember, she advised as they prepared to leave, most folks in Pine Creek are good people who just want to feel safe. Show them respect even if they don't extend the same courtesy to us. Thunder would stay behind to guard Timber, who had been securely confined to the cottage with ample food, water, and his favorite toys. Lily hated leaving him, especially after promising him they would return soon, his amber eyes following her with such trust that it made her heart ache. Pine Creek's town hall was actually the multi-purpose room of the community church, a white clapboard building with a modest steeple that had served the village for over a century. As they approached, Lily saw a larger crowd than she'd expected, gathered outside nearly 30 people in a town of barely 200 souls. Mrs. Bennett, the retired school teacher who had taught Lily's mother decades earlier, intercepted them before they reached the steps. "Martha, dear, it's gotten rather heated already," she warned in a low voice. "Frank's been busy this past week, stirring up concerns. He's brought photos of livestock killings from 3 counties over claiming they're evidence of what wolves do." Martha's chin lifted slightly, a gesture Lily recognized as her grandmother preparing for battle. "Well then, we'll just have to provide some evidence of our own, won't we, Beatrice?" Inside the room fell silent as they entered. Lily felt dozens of eyes following them as Martha guided her to seats in the front row, directly across from where Frank Dawson sat, with several other men, including Bill Morgan, a sheep farmer whose property bordered the National Forest. Sheriff Miller stood at a small podium, looking uncomfortable in his formal uniform. "Now that Martha and Lily Calloway have joined us," the sheriff began, "we can address the concern that's been raised about the wolf currently being kept on Calloway property." What followed was 2 hours of increasingly tense debate. Frank and his supporters argued passionately about public safety, the danger to livestock, and regulations regarding wild predators. Martha, when given her turn to speak, presented a carefully prepared statement about Timber's orphan status, her rehabilitation experience, and her plans to eventually transition him to a wildlife sanctuary when appropriate. "The animal has shown no aggressive tendencies," she concluded firmly, "and is kept securely on private property well away from town or neighboring farms." "Is that so?" Frank challenged, standing abruptly. "Then how do you explain these?" He slapped several photographs onto the table beside the sheriff, images of large paw prints in mud. "Found these just yesterday, not half a mile from Bill's sheep pasture." "You're telling me your pet stays put on your land, Martha?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Martha examined the photos, her expression unreadable. "These tracks are from a full-grown adult wolf," she said finally. "Timber is barely 5 months old. His paws aren't half the size yet." Frank scoffed. "A convenient excuse. How do we know there's not a whole pack you're harboring out there?" Lily couldn't remain silent any longer. Rising from her seat, she faced the room with trembling knees but a steady voice. "Timber doesn't hurt anything except the mice Thunder teaches him to catch," she said clearly. "He's gentle and smart, and he's learning every day how to behave. He's not dangerous. He's just alone without his family, like—" She swallowed hard, "like I was when my dad died. Grandma Martha says, sometimes people and animals find each other when they both need healing." A hush fell over the room. Even Frank seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw honesty from the small, serious girl standing before them. Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. "Thank you, Lily. Now I believe we need to put this matter to a community vote, as is our tradition." The final decision was narrowly in Martha's favor. Timber could remain under her care until the end of summer, with weekly visits from the sheriff to ensure proper containment. After that, Martha would need to place him with a licensed wildlife rehabilitation center or sanctuary. No exceptions. As they drove home in silence, Lily finally asked the question that had been burning inside her. "Are you really going to send Timber away, Grandma?" Martha's weathered hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Let's cross that bridge when we come to it, Dandelion. For now, we have the rest of the summer to figure things out." But when they returned to the cottage, they found Thunder pacing anxiously on the porch and Timber nowhere to be seen. The back door stood ajar, its screen torn, where sharp puppy teeth had clearly worked their way through. Martha's face paled as she hurried inside, calling Timber's name with increasing urgency. They searched the entire property, Lily's voice growing hoarse from shouting into the gathering dusk. Thunder led them on a winding path that followed Timber's scent to the edge of the forest, where the trail disappeared into the deepening shadows beneath the ancient trees. He must have heard the truck coming and panicked. Martha said, her face drawn with worry. He's never been left alone for so long before. As darkness fell completely, they were forced to abandon the search, returning to the cottage with heavy hearts. Lily sat desolate on the porch steps, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Thunder paced restlessly, occasionally approaching to press his massive head against her knee in what felt like consolation. "He'll come back," Martha assured her, though uncertainty shadowed her words. "He knows where home is, and Thunder can find him if anyone can." They left the porch light burning and Timber's favorite blanket just outside the door, a beacon and a promise of welcome should he return in the night. Lily barely slept, listening for any sound that might indicate the wolf pup's return. But dawn arrived with no sign of Timber, and the blanket remained untouched. After a breakfast neither of them could eat, Martha and Lily prepared to resume their search. They had just stepped onto the porch when Thunder, who had disappeared an hour earlier, emerged from the tree line. Behind him, moving with cautious steps, came Timber. The wolf pup was muddy and bedraggled, a small cut visible on his muzzle, but otherwise unharmed. "Ash, Timber!" Lily cried, rushing down the steps. The young wolf bounded forward at the sound of her voice, all hesitation forgotten as he greeted her with enthusiastic licks to her face. Thunder watched this reunion with what could only be described as smug satisfaction. His tail held high as he sauntered past Martha to claim his usual place on the porch railing. Martha knelt to examine Timber, checking him thoroughly for injuries beyond the small cut. "Where have you been, you rascal?" she murmured, relief evident in every line of her body. "Had us worried sick." Later, after Timber had been bathed and fed and was sleeping soundly on his blanket by the fireplace, Martha sat with Lily on the porch swing. Thunder must have found him in the night, she theorized, watching the massive cat perform his evening grooming ritual. Brought him home when he was ready to return. Brought him home when he was... Lily nodded, still processing the emotions of the past 24 hours. The fear of losing Timber, the joy of his return, and underneath it all, the looming knowledge that she might lose him again, this time to human decisions rather than woodland adventures. "Grandma," she began hesitantly, "at the town meeting when Frank showed those wolf tracks, those weren't from Timber. Were there other wolves in the forest?" Martha regarded her granddaughter thoughtfully. "These woods have always had wolves, Dandelion. They keep to themselves, mostly avoiding humans when they can. But yes, there's a small pack that claims territory several miles north of here. Have you ever seen them? If or glimpsed them now and then, heard them more often on still nights. If you listen carefully, you can sometimes hear them howling to each other across the valleys." Lily hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming in her mind since Timber's appearance in their lives. "Do you think could Timber's mother have been from that pack?" "Possible," Martha allowed, "though wolf territories are large and she might have come from farther away." She studied Lily's expression. "What's on your mind, child?" "Just wondering if he has family out there somewhere. Real wolf family." Martha's arm came around Lily's shoulders, pulling her close. "All creatures need family, Dandelion. Some are born to it, some find it along the way. Either path is real." That night, as a full moon rose above the forest, Lily was awakened by Timber's movement beside her bed. The young wolf stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the silver-blue moonlight streaming through the glass. His ears were pricked forward, his entire body alert to something beyond human perception. From somewhere deep in the forest came the haunting sound of a wolf's howl, a long musical call that raised goosebumps along Lily's arms. After a moment of silence, a second howl answered, then a third, creating an eerie chorus that seemed to call to something primal within her own chest. Timber listened intently, his amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then, to Lily's amazement, he raised his muzzle and responded with his own howl. No longer the high-pitched puppy sound she'd heard before, but a deeper, more resonant call that seemed to surprise even him. Thunder, who had been sleeping at the foot of Lily's bed, raised his head to observe this development with inscrutable yellow eyes. The cat made no move to stop Timber, merely watched as the young wolf communicated with his wild kin for what might have been the first time. Lily slipped from her bed and knelt beside Timber, placing a gentle hand on his back. She could feel the vibration of his howl through her palm, could sense the yearning in his voice as he called into the night. The distant wolves responded again, their chorus seeming to move closer, though still deep within the forest heart. When the howling finally ceased, Timber turned to Lily, pressing his muzzle against her cheek in what felt like reassurance. Then he returned to his place beside her bed, curling up with a deep sigh that somehow conveyed contentment rather than restlessness. Thunder resumed his position at Lily's feet, and the cottage settled back into silence. But Lily lay awake long after staring at the moon-dappled ceiling, wondering what message had passed between Timber and the wild wolves, and what it might mean for his future and for hers. Awea was Shireen and was Shireen. July unfolded like a green ribbon across Martha's property, bringing with it blazing sunshine that turned the meadowgrass golden and drove Lily, Timber, and Thunder to seek refuge in the dappled shade of the old oak trees. Each morning began the same way Lily would wake to find Timber's amber eyes watching her patiently from beside her bed. Thunder typically sprawled nearby in a patch of sunlight. After a breakfast where Martha insisted on proper fuel for growing bodies, human and animal alike, they would begin their daily routines. Martha had established a structured schedule that balanced Timber's education with Lily's summer reading and chores. Mornings were dedicated to training not just basic commands, but what Martha called woodland wisdom. Lily learned to move quietly through the underbrush, Timber padding silently beside her, both following Thunder's expert lead. The massive cat seemed to possess an uncanny ability to navigate the forest without disturbing a single leaf, a skill Timber mimicked with increasing proficiency. "Watch how low he keeps his body," Martha would murmur, nodding toward Thunder, as he demonstrated stalking techniques to his wolfish protege. "There's no wasted motion, no unnecessary sound." By midsummer, Timber had mastered an impressive vocabulary. He could distinguish between dozens of commands and objects, responding immediately to Lily's soft instructions, or more remarkably, to subtle hand signals Martha had taught them both. When visitors came, which happened less frequently as rumors about the wolf spread, Timber would retreat to his special place beneath the porch stairs, at the first whispered word from Lily, remaining perfectly still until she released him. "He understands more than most people would believe possible," Martha told Lily one evening as they watched Timber and Thunder sharing the remains of a rabbit the cat had caught. "Wolves are family creatures you see in the wild. They learn the habits and rules of their pack through observation and practice. Timber sees us as his pack now." Lily cherished these quiet moments of instruction. Martha never spoke to her as if she were merely a child, but as an apprentice to knowledge the older woman had accumulated over decades. She taught Lily to identify edible plants, to read weather changes in the shapes of clouds, to recognize the distinctive tracks of every creature that passed through their land. Your great-grandmother could tell which individual deer had visited her garden just by the shape of their hooves, Martha said, guiding Lily's fingers along a track Timber was investigating. She'd say, "That's old Crooked Horn coming to steal my cabbages again," and she'd be right every time. Lily absorbed these stories eagerly, imagining a lineage of women with special connections to the natural world. Sometimes when she was alone with Timber in the meadow, she'd close her eyes and try to sense the forest, as Martha described as a living entity with countless voices speaking simultaneously. On rare, perfect moments of stillness, she almost thought she could. One sweltering afternoon in late July, while Martha napped inside, Lily took Timber to the small creek that marked the eastern boundary of the property. Thunder unusually had not accompanied them, having disappeared on one of his mysterious solo excursions into the deeper forest. The creek burbled invitingly, its clear water sparkling in patches of sunlight that penetrated the canopy above. Lily dipped her feet in, sighing with relief at the cool water. Timber approached cautiously, sniffing at the current, before delicately placing one paw in the shallows. His surprised expression at the sensation made her laugh. "It's just water, silly," she teased, splashing him gently. A sudden crashing sound from across the creek silenced her. Timber's ears pricked forward, his body tensing as he moved protectively in front of Lily. Through the trees on the opposite bank, she glimpsed the distinctive orange of a hunting vest, then heard the unmistakable voice of Frank Dawson. "Told you I seen wolf tracks along here, Bilky." Frank's growling tone carried clearly across the water. Big ones. That thing Martha's raising is growing fast. Lily tugged gently at Timber's scruff, backing them both into the deeper shadows of a cluster of ferns. Her heart pounded as she caught sight of Frank and Bill Morgan, both carrying rifles slung over their shoulders. "County meeting's on Monday," Bill replied, scanning the creek. "Sheriff says we gotta do this legal." Frank, "No, taking matters into our own hands." Frank spat into the water. "By the time those fools make up their minds that Wolf will be big enough to take down a man, you want to wait till some kid gets mauled or more of your sheep end up with their throats torn out." That was a wild pack passing through, not Martha's pet. Bill argued, though he sounded uncertain. Sheriff checked the tracks himself. "Wolf's a wolf," Frank insisted. "And that old woman's got no business keeping one," filling that city girl's head with nonsense about being some kind of animal whisperer. He barked out a harsh laugh. "Callaway women and their delusions." "My daddy used to say Martha's mother was the same way, thought she had some special connection to the beast." Load of superstitious garbage. Lily held her breath as the men continued downstream, their voices fading gradually. Only when the forest had been silent for several minutes did she exhale, her arms wrapped tightly around Timber's neck. The young wolf remained watchful, his muscles still tense beneath her hands. "Let's go home," she whispered, troubled by what she'd overheard. When she reported the encounter to Martha, her grandmother's face grew grave. "Frank Dawson has been looking for an excuse to cause trouble since his hunting lease on the North Ridge wasn't renewed," she said, setting down her wooden spoon beside the stew she'd been stirring. "His father was the same, always pushing boundaries, taking more than his share, resenting anyone who lived differently than he thought they should study. He said there's a county meeting Monday about timber." Lily said, anxiety knotting her stomach. "Are they going to take him away?" Martha wiped her hands on her apron, her blue eyes sharp with determination. "Not if I have anything to say about it. The Callaways have been on this land for 5 generations. Child, we've weathered worse storms than Frank Dawson." The following Sunday, Martha drove them into town for the first time since timber had come into their lives. Lily sat rigidly in the passenger seat of the old pickup, rehearsing what her grandmother had coached her to say at the meeting. Timber and Thunder had been left at home with extra food and water in case they returned later than planned. As they approached the town hall, Lily saw another confrontation brewing. Frank Dawson stood at the foot of the church steps, surrounded by a group of men, including Bill Morgan and several other local farmers. On the opposite side, Mrs. Bennett and a smaller group of supporters, mostly women, had positioned themselves defensively. "Wolves have a right to exist in their natural habitat," Mrs. Bennett was saying firmly as Martha and Lily approached. "And the Callaway property has been a wildlife sanctuary since before most of your grandfathers were born." "Natural habitat, sure," Frank countered, his face flushed with anger or alcohol, possibly both. "Not in someone's backyard, not where children might be at risk." "The only risk to children around here," Martha interjected, her voice carrying clearly across the churchyard, "is teaching them that fear and ignorance should guide their decisions rather than knowledge and compassion." Frank's head snapped toward them, his eyes narrowing as he recognized Martha. "Well, if it isn't the wolf woman herself come to defend her pet predator, that's enough, Frankma." Sheriff Miller's authoritative voice cut through the tension as he emerged from the church doors. "This discussion will take place inside with civility, or not at all. Is that understood?" The meeting that followed was even more contentious than the previous one. Frank presented supposed evidence of wolf attacks from neighboring counties, carefully selected photographs designed to provoke fear rather than understanding. Martha countered with expert testimony she'd arranged through her contacts at the university wildlife program, including statistics on the rarity of wolf aggression toward humans and the ecological benefits of predator populations. Through it all, Lily sat quietly beside her grandmother, gathering her courage for when she might be called upon to speak. When Sheriff Miller finally asked if she had anything to add to the discussion, she rose on shaky legs but spoke with conviction. "Timber isn't just a wolf," she told the assembled townspeople. "He's learning to be part of our family while still keeping his wild nature. Grandma Martha says that's what makes him special. He chooses to stay with us to learn our ways, even though he's free to leave. She looked directly at Frank Dawson. He's never hurt anyone or anything except the mice that Thunder teaches him to catch. And he makes the forest feel safer somehow, like it's being watched over properly again. Her simple words seemed to resonate with many in the room. Several of the undecided council members nodded thoughtfully, and even Bill Morgan's expression softened slightly. In the end, the vote was more decisively in Martha's favor than before. Timber could remain under her care until a final decision was reached regarding his permanent status. The council will reconvene on this matter at the end of August. Sheriff Miller announced at that time Martha Calloway will present her long-term rehabilitation plan for the wolf, including safety measures and eventual transition strategies. It wasn't a complete victory, Lily knew, but it bought them precious time for Timber to continue growing and learning, time for Martha to gather more support. Time for Lily to savor the extraordinary summer that had already transformed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. As they drove home in the gathering dusk, Martha reached across the seat to squeeze Lily's hand. "You did well today, Dandelion. Spoke from the heart, just as I knew you would." "What happens now?" Lily asked, watching the forest slide past their windows, shadows deepening between the ancient trees. "What will we say at the end of August?" Martha's expression turned thoughtful. "We tell the truth that Timber's future must be determined by what's best for him, not by human fears or preferences, and by then I suspect he'll have shown us more clearly which path he means to take." Lily considered this enigmatic answer. "You think he'll decide for himself whether to stay with us or go back to the wild?" "I think he already knows what he wants," Martha replied, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "He's just waiting for all of us to catch up to his understanding." They returned to a peaceful cottage, Thunder lounging regally on the porch railing, and Timber bounding down the steps to greet them with unmistakable joy. Whatever uncertainties the future held, Lily thought as she buried her fingers in the wolf's thick fur. This moment of homecoming was perfect in its simplicity: a girl, a wolf, a wise grandmother in the silent watching forest that somehow held them all in its ancient embrace. August arrived with brutal swiftness, bringing sweltering heat and the looming specter of separation. Lily's days took on a desperate quality as she tried to cram every possible moment with Timber exploring every corner of the property, teaching him new commands and sleeping with her hand buried in his ever-thickening fur. Timber seemed to sense her growing anxiety. He rarely left her side now, following her even on routine trips to the garden or chicken coop, where he'd previously been content to nap on the porch. His puppyish exuberance had mellowed into a watchful alertness that sometimes startled Lily with its intensity, especially when strangers approached the property. During Sheriff Miller's weekly visits, Timber demonstrated impeccable behavior, responding instantly to commands and showing appropriate caution without aggression. The sheriff seemed increasingly impressed, though he remained firm about the timeline for a final decision. "He's a fine animal, Martha," he admitted during his visit in mid-August. "But the state has clear regulations about keeping native wildlife, especially apex predators. The council will need to see a concrete plan for his future at the end of the month." Martha nodded without commitment, seeing him to his car, with her usual diplomatic politeness. When she returned to the porch where Lily sat with Timber and Thunder, her expression was troubled. "Time's running short," she murmured, more to herself than to Lily. "And I'm not sure any of the sanctuaries I've contacted will understand what he needs." "Which is what?" Lily asked, scratching behind Timber's ears. "Freedom within boundaries," Martha replied after a thoughtful pause. "Structure without captivity, family without chains." She sighed deeply. Few humans understand that balance, let alone provide it for creatures like him. That night, Lily was awakened by Thunder's insistent paw batting at her cheek. Opening her eyes groggily, she realized Timber was not in his usual spot beside her bed. The window stood open, moonlight spilling across the wooden floor in a silver rectangle. "Davert Timber," she called softly, suddenly alert. Thunder meowed urgently, jumping to the windowsill, and looking back at her expectantly. Heart pounding, Lily slipped on her boots and followed the cat outside, grateful that Martha was a deep sleeper. The August night was warm crickets providing a constant backdrop of sound as she followed Thunder's gray form across the yard and toward the tree line. She found Timber at the edge of the forest, sitting perfectly still, his muzzle raised to catch some scent Lily couldn't detect. When she approached, he turned to her with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. Then he looked back toward the deep woods, a low whine emerging from his throat. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. "What do you hear?" The answer came in a distant howl, a long, mournful call that raised goosebumps along Lily's arms. Timber's ears pricked forward, his body quivering with attention. After a moment's silence, he responded with his own howl, deeper now than when he was younger, but still recognizably adolescent. The exchange continued, call and response across the darkness, while Lily and Thunder sat motionless beside Timber. Lily felt tears sliding down her cheeks as understanding dawned. The wild pack was passing through perhaps the same one that had lost Timber's mother months ago. "Are you going to leave?" she asked brokenly when the distant howling finally ceased. "Is that what you want?" Timber turned to her, pressing his muzzle gently against her wet cheek. His amber eyes held such intelligence that Lily almost expected him to answer in words. Instead, he simply leaned against her, his warm weight reassuring against her side, while Thunder settled on her other side, completing their small circle. They remained that way until dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold. When Martha found them there still seated at the forest edge, she asked no questions, merely nodded as if confirming something she had long suspected. "A wild heart calls to its own," she said softly, helping Lily to her feet. "But that doesn't mean the calling must always be answered right away." As they walked back to the cottage, Timber padding between them and Thunder leading the way, Martha revealed her decision. Lily would stay for the remainder of August, missing the first week of school. With her mother's reluctant permission, Timber would remain with them while Martha continued seeking the right solution, one that honored both his wild nature and the bonds he had formed. There are more paths forward than the law imagines," Martha said with a wink that reminded Lily her grandmother had her own way of bending rules when necessary, and more wisdom in letting things unfold naturally than in enforcing choices before their time. For the remainder of August, their days took on a dreamlike quality. Golden afternoons spent exploring the meadow's evenings, on the porch swing with Martha telling stories of her youth nights, when Timber would sometimes answer distant howls, but always return to Lily's side. It was Lily would later reflect the most perfect month of her childhood, a time when boundaries between human and wild past and present seemed as permeable as morning mist. But she had almost forgotten the looming threat of Frank Dawson and his vendetta against Timber almost. The last day of August dawned crisp and clear with the first hints of autumn touching the maple leaves at the edge of Martha's property. September had arrived, bringing with it the inevitability of Lily's return to Portland in 5th grade. Her mother had already called twice that week, confirming bus schedules and reminding Lily to pack her new school supplies. "I need to make a quick trip into town this morning," Martha announced at breakfast, refilling Lily's glass of fresh squeezed orange juice. "Sheriff Miller has some paperwork for me to review before the council meeting tomorrow, and Mrs. Bennett wants to discuss strategy one last time. Can I come with you?" Lily asked, not wanting to waste a moment of her remaining time with her grandmother. Martha shook her head, smiling gently. "Someone needs to stay with Timber Dandelion. I won't be gone more than an hour or two. Thunder will keep you both company, and you know the rules. Stay within sight of the cottage. Don't go near the creek alone, and keep Timber with me at all times," Lily recited dutifully. After Martha left in the blue pickup, Lily spent the morning in the vegetable garden with Timber and Thunder, harvesting the last of the summer tomatoes and pulling stubborn weeds from around the pumpkin vines. The sun climbed higher, bringing with it the distinctive August heat that seemed to press down on the world like a heavy blanket. "Let's rest in the shade," Lily suggested to her companions around midday, retreating to the old oak tree with a book and a glass of lemonade. Thunder claimed a patch of sun-dappled ground nearby, while Timber sprawled beside Lily, his head resting on her leg as she read aloud from a collection of nature poems Martha had given her. The distant sound of an approaching vehicle made Timber's ears prick forward. Thunder, too, raised his head, yellow eyes narrowing as he stared toward the driveway. Expecting to see Martha's familiar blue pickup, Lily was surprised when a mud-spattered truck she recognized as Frank Dawson's rounded the final bend. Why is he here?" she whispered, anxiety immediately tightening her chest. Timber pressed closer to her side, sensing her distress. Thunder rose to his feet, tail swishing with obvious displeasure. The truck stopped in front of the cottage and Frank emerged, slamming the door with unnecessary force. He had a rifle slung over one shoulder, and his face wore the distinctive flush of a man who had been drinking despite the early hour. "Martha Calloway," he shouted toward the cottage. "Get out here, we need to settle this wolf business once and for all." Lily remained frozen beneath the oak tree, hoping Frank wouldn't notice them. In the dappled shadows, Timber's body had gone rigid against her side, a low growl building in his throat that she desperately tried to silence with a gentle hand on his muzzle. "I see you there, girl," Frank called, his bloodshot eyes finding her beneath the tree. "Where's your grandmother and that wolf she insists on keeping like a pet?" "Grandma's in town." Lily answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "She'll be back soon. You should come back then if you want to talk to her." Frank began walking toward them, his movements slightly unsteady. "Don't need to talk to her. Council meeting's a waste of time. Everyone knows wild animals belong in the wild or mounted on a wall." He patted the rifle on his shoulder meaningfully. "Figure I'll save the county the trouble of deciding what to do with that beast." Timber's growl became audible now, impossible to suppress. Thunder had positioned himself between Frank and Lily, his fur standing on end, making him appear even larger than his already impressive size. "Leave us alone, Mr. Dawson," Lily said, rising to her feet with one hand firmly on Timber's harness. "You're not allowed to hunt on our property." Frank's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Hunting vermin isn't regulated, girl, and that's what wolves are, vermin. States should have never let them come back." He took another step forward, and Thunder responded with a warning hiss that would have given most sensible people pause. But Frank was neither sensible nor sober. He continued advancing, fumbling with the rifle strap. "Run," Lily whispered to Timber, releasing his harness. "Go hide." But Timber stood his ground, placing himself firmly in front of Lily as Frank raised his rifle. What happened next occurred with such speed that Lily would later struggle to describe the sequence of events. Thunder launched himself at Frank with a yowl that sounded nothing like a domestic cat, aiming for the man's face with extended claws. Frank shouted in alarm, swinging the rifle toward the airborne feline. Timber seized the moment to charge, teeth closing on Frank's pant leg and pulling sharply, throwing the man off balance. Frank crashed to the ground, the rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. Thunder landed on his chest, hissing directly into his face, while Timber maintained his grip on the man's leg, growling with unmistakable intent. "Call them off," Frank shouted, real fear replacing his earlier bravado. "Jesus Christ, call them off." For not a Thunder, Timber, enough, Lily commanded, surprised at the authority in her own voice. Both animals immediately backed away from Frank, though they maintained defensive positions on either side of Lily. The sound of tires on gravel announced another vehicle's arrival. Martha's pickup skidded to a halt beside Frank's truck, and her grandmother emerged, moving with surprising speed for a woman her age. "What in God's name is going on here?" she demanded, taking in the scene. With a sweeping glance, Frank sprawled on the ground, his rifle several feet away. Thunder and Timber standing protectively beside Lily. "Your wolf attacked me," Frank sputtered, struggling to his feet. "And that demon cat, they're dangerous animals, both of them." "My wolf and my cat defended my granddaughter from an armed, intoxicated man trespassing on our property with obvious ill intent," Martha corrected, her voice deadly calm. "I wonder what Sheriff Miller will have to say about that, especially when he hears you threatened a child with a loaded firearm." Frank's face paled beneath its perpetual sunburn. The implied threat of legal consequences seemed to penetrate his alcohol-fogged mind. "This isn't over, Martha," he muttered, retrieving his rifle with unsteady hands. "That wolf's a menace, just a matter of time before it shows its true nature." "Get off my land, Frank Dawson," Martha replied, not bothering to hide her contempt. "And don't come back without a legal warrant or the sheriff at your side." They watched in silence as Frank climbed back into his truck and drove away the vehicle, weaving slightly as it disappeared down the driveway. Only when he was completely gone did Martha turn to Lily, her face softening with concern. Are you all right, Dandelion?" Lily nodded, though her hands were still trembling from the confrontation. "Thunder and Timber protected me. They knew exactly what to do without hurting him." Martha knelt to examine both animals, checking for injuries despite their obvious good health. "Of course they did. Timber could have done serious damage if he'd wanted to, and Thunder could have blinded Frank with one good swipe. They showed remarkable restraint." She looked up at Lily with an expression of profound pride. They showed the wisdom that comes from being loved properly. That evening, after calling Sheriff Miller to report the incident, resulting in Frank being formally warned to stay away from the Calloway property, Martha sat with Lily on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of pink and gold. Timber lay at their feet, occasionally raising his head to scan the meadow with vigilant eyes. Thunder maintained his usual position on the railing, seemingly unperturbed by the day's excitement. "I've been thinking," Martha said finally, her voice thoughtful in the gathering twilight, "about Timber's future and yours, and how they might be connected." Lily turned to her grandmother, hope and trepidation mingling in her chest. "What do you mean?" "The council will want a decision tomorrow. A formal plan for where Timber will go, who will be responsible for him." Martha's weathered hand found Lily's, squeezing gently. "I visited every wildlife sanctuary within 300 miles, spoken with every expert willing to give me time. None of them understand what makes Timber special. None of them see that he straddles two worlds, not fully wild anymore, but never truly tame either. So what will happen to him? That depends," Martha replied, her blue eyes reflecting the last golden light of day. "On what your mother says when she arrives tomorrow morning." Lily's breath caught. "Mom's coming here, but she's not supposed to pick me up until next week. I called her this afternoon after Frank left, told her what happened and what I'm proposing." Martha's expression was both determined and serene, as if she'd finally solved a complex puzzle. "It's time for some truths to be spoken that have been hidden too long, Dandelion. Some family secrets that need to see daylight at last." Before Lily could ask what secrets her grandmother meant, Thunder suddenly stood alert on the railing, his attention fixed on the forest edge. Timber, too, raised his head, ears pricked forward and nostrils flaring as he caught some scent imperceptible to human senses. From the deepening shadows beneath the ancient trees, a pair of amber eyes reflected the porch light, eyes startlingly similar to Timber's, but set in the face of a fully grown wolf. A massive, silver-gray female emerged partially from the tree line, her presence commanding immediate attention. Behind her, partially hidden by undergrowth, several other wolves waited silently. "The pack," Lily whispered, scarcely daring to breathe. "They've come closer than ever before?" Martha nodded, showing no surprise at the wolves' appearance. "They've been watching us all summer, keeping track of Timber's progress. Tonight they've come to make their offer more clearly." The lead wolf, the alpha female Lily presumed, sat back on her haunches at the forest edge, watching the cottage with intelligent eyes. She made no aggressive moves, simply waited with the infinite patience of a creature accustomed to nature's rhythms. Timber whined softly, looking from the wolf to Lily, with unmistakable conflict in his expression. "He wants to go to them." Lily realized aloud, her heart constricting painfully in her chest. "But he doesn't want to leave us." "That's his choice to make," Martha said gently. "Tonight, tomorrow, or whenever he's ready, we can't make it for him. Dandelion, no matter how much we love him." As if understanding their conversation, Timber pressed his muzzle against Lily's hand, then trotted to Martha to do the same. With a final glance back at them, he descended the porch steps and crossed the yard with measured strides, approaching the waiting alpha. The two wolves touched noses briefly in exchange that seemed to carry volumes of communication incomprehensible to human observers. Then together they retreated into the forest shadows the rest of the pack, melting away before them until the tree line stood empty once more. "He's gone," Lily said, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "Just like that." Martha's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Not gone, Dandelion, just answering the call of his wild kin. Whether he returns or not, he's made his own choice freely. That's the greatest gift we could give him." Thunder jumped down from his perch, settling beside Lily on the swing and purring loudly as if trying to comfort her in his own way. As darkness settled completely over the cottage, they remained on the porch. Three unlikely family members bound by love and loss, in the understanding that true freedom sometimes meant letting go. Lily awoke before dawn to Thunder's insistent pawing at her blankets. The massive cat was more agitated than she'd ever seen him, pacing at the foot of her bed and meowing with unusual urgency. When she sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes, he darted to the window, looking back at her expectantly. "What is it, Thunder?" she whispered, slipping from bed and crossing to the window that overlooked the backyard and the forest beyond. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to soften the eastern sky, casting the landscape in shades of deep blue and purple. At first she saw nothing unusual, just the familiar contours of Martha's property emerging from night's shadows. Then a movement at the tree line caught her eye. A figure detached itself from the darkness between the trees, moving with fluid grace across the dewy grass. Patrice Narcer the timber. But he was not alone. Behind him came the alpha female, and behind her two younger wolves, adolescents by their size, perhaps siblings from her previous litter. The small procession crossed the yard with unhurried purpose, stopping at the midpoint between forest and cottage as if waiting for acknowledgement. Without bothering to dress or lace her boots properly, Lily rushed downstairs and out the back door. Thunder close at her heels, Martha appeared on the porch a moment later, wrapping a faded robe around her nightgown as she watched the extraordinary scene unfolding in her yard. Timber trotted forward to greet Lily, touching his nose to her outstretched hand with obvious joy. But he didn't remain by her side as he once would have. Instead, he returned to the alpha female sitting beside her, as if seeking permission for what would happen next. The alpha moved forward, approaching Lily with careful dignity. Thunder positioned himself protectively beside his human, but made no aggressive move, seeming to understand that this was a diplomatic visit rather than a threat. The wolf stopped several paces away, regarding Lily with piercing intelligence. Martha joined them, moving slowly to stand beside her granddaughter. "This is an honor," she said softly. "She's offering you her respect." "What should I do?" Lily whispered back, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and wonder. "Trust your instincts, Dandelion." Taking a deep breath, Lily knelt on the damp grass, making herself smaller, less threatening. She extended one hand palm down, not reaching toward the wolf, but offering connection if the wild creature chose to accept it. For several breathless moments, the alpha remained motionless, assessing. Then with deliberate grace, she closed the distance between them, sniffing Lily's fingertips briefly before pressing her muzzle against the girl's open palm, a gesture of acceptance that brought fresh tears to Lily's eyes. "She understands. You helped to raise her kin," Martha explained, her voice hushed with reverence. "Wolves don't forget debts or allegiances." As quickly as it had happened, the moment of connection ended. The alpha retreated to her waiting pack members, where Timber sat watching the exchange with bright eyes. With a subtle movement of her head that Lily somehow recognized as a signal, the alpha turned back toward the forest. The younger wolves followed immediately, but Timber hesitated, looking back at Lily with an expression that seemed to ask a question. "It's okay," Lily told him, her voice breaking slightly. "You can go with them. I understand." Timber approached her one last time, pressing his whole body against her in a wolf's version of an embrace. Lily buried her face in his thick fur, memorizing his wild scent and the solid warmth of him. Then he was gone, bounding after his wild family as they disappeared into the forest that was his birthright, Thunder rubbed consolingly against Lily's legs as she stood watching the empty tree line, her tears falling freely. Now Martha's arm came around her shoulders. "He'll be back," her grandmother said with quiet certainty. "Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but he'll return when he chooses. The pack's territory includes our land. They've claimed it for generations. He'll live wild with them, learn their ways, but I suspect he'll visit his human family when the mood strikes him." "How can you be sure?" Lily asked, needing to believe her grandmother's confidence. Martha smiled, her weathered face softened by the growing dawn light. "Because that's what they've always done, Dandelion. The wolves that choose to know us, to walk between worlds, as the Callaway women have done for generations." No. Sarah Morgan's sedan pulled into Martha's driveway shortly before noon, dust billowing around its tires as it came to a stop behind the blue pickup. Lily watched from the porch swing, Thunder lounging beside her with his massive head resting on her lap. They had been sitting there since breakfast, watching the forest edge for any sign of timber, though Martha had gently suggested that the pack would likely stay deep in the woods during daylight hours. "Remember what we discussed?" Martha murmured, joining Lily on the swing, as Sarah emerged from her car looking travel-worn and tense. "Let me explain everything first. Your mother needs to understand the whole story before any decisions are made." Sarah climbed the porch steps, her nurse's observant gaze taking in the scene before her. Her daughter's red-rimmed eyes, the protective posture of the enormous cat beside her, Martha's unusual formality. "What's happened?" she asked without preamble. "Your call made it sound urgent, Mother. But now I'm here and everything seems fine. Not urgent in the sense of immediate danger," Martha clarified, gesturing for Sarah to take the rocking chair across from them. "But important, yes. There are things about our family you need to know, Sarah. Things I should have told you years ago." Over the next hour, as the midday sun climbed toward its zenith, Martha spoke with steady clarity about the Callaway legacy, a lineage of women with special connections to the natural world, particularly to the wolves that had inhabited these forests for centuries. She explained how this gift manifested differently in each generation. Her grandmother's uncanny ability to predict weather patterns, her mother's knack for healing both animals and humans with herbal remedies, her own talent for communicating with creatures others found mysterious or threatening. And Lily has inherited this gift, Martha concluded, watching her daughter's increasingly skeptical expression. It revealed itself most clearly through her bond with timber, but it's been evident since she was small, the way animals respond to her, her intuitive understanding of natural patterns. Sarah had remained silent throughout most of the explanation, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. Now she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "This is Mother. Are you seriously suggesting our family has some kind of mystical communion with wild animals? That's not possible." "Not mystical," Martha corrected patiently. "Natural and inherited empathy, an ability to communicate through means beyond words. Scientists would probably call it heightened intuition, combined with subtle body language reading. But whatever name you give it, it's real, and it's why Timber responded to Lily as he did." "And where is this wolf now?" Sarah asked, glancing around as if expecting Timber to materialize on the porch. "The animal you've been raising all summer, without my knowledge or consent." Lily spoke for the first time since her mother's arrival. "He's gone back to the wild pack. They came for him this morning, but Grandma thinks he'll visit sometimes because this is still his territory." Sarah's expression softened slightly at the evident grief in her daughter's voice. "I'm sorry you lost your friend Lily, but surely you understand that wild animals belong in the wild. It's better this way." "Adhan, that's just it," Martha interjected. "The Callaway women have always understood that the boundary between wild and tame isn't as rigid as most people believe. We don't tame the creatures we connect with. We form partnerships based on mutual respect and choice." Sarah's patience visibly frayed. "This is absurd. You're talking about wolves like they're people capable of making conscious decisions about human relationships. Do you remember when you were about Lily's age?" Martha asked, shifting tactics. "And you got lost in the woods during that terrible storm. Ya told me something, found you, and led you home." something with golden eyes. Sarah's face paled, her defensive posture faltering. I was confused. Hypothermic? You described it perfectly, Sarah. A gray wolf that walked beside you all the way to our clearing, but vanished before you reached the porch light. Martha leaned forward, her blue eyes intent on her daughter's face. That wolf was the grandmother of the alpha female who now leads the local pack. The same pack that accepted Timber this morning. The same lineage that has been intertwined with ours for generations. Thunder chose that moment to rise from his place beside Lily, stretching languidly before approaching Sarah. The cat had never shown particular interest in Lily's mother during her infrequent visits, typically maintaining a dignified distance from the woman who made no secret of her dislike for animal hair on her clothing. Now, to everyone's surprise, he jumped onto the arm of Sarah's rocking chair and fixed her with his unblinking yellow stare. He knows, Lily said softly. Thunder understands we're talking about the wolves. He was there this morning when they came. Sarah regarded the massive cat with undisguised wariness. And I suppose you're going to tell me Thunder is also part of this mystical connection, that he's not just an unusually large stray cat, but some kind of familiar spirit. Martha chuckled, genuine amusement warming her voice. Nothing so dramatic, but Thunder does seem to understand things other cats don't. And he was the one who found Timber in the first place, brought him home when he was orphaned and starving. A cat that rescues wolf pups, Sarah muttered. What's next? Dancing badgers and raccoons that do laundry. But there was less bite in her sarcasm than before. And when Thunder cautiously extended his enormous paw to touch her arm, she didn't immediately brush him away. The cat's purr grew louder, vibrating through the wooden arm of the chair, and something in Sarah's rigid posture gradually relaxed. Why are you telling me this now? She asked, finally addressing her mother while absently running one finger between Thunder's ears. After all these years of keeping your theories about our family to yourself, Martha exchanged glances with Lily before answering, because I'm asking you to consider a change. Sarah, one that would honor both our family's legacy and Lily's obvious affinity for this place. What kind of change? Let Lily live here with me during the school year. Pine Creek has a perfectly good elementary school, and I'm more than capable of providing a stable home. You could visit whenever you want, of course, and Lily would spend holidays and some weekends with you in Portland. Sarah stiffened her hand, freezing mid-stroke on Thunder's head. You want me to give up my daughter because you think she has some special connection to wolves? Have you lost your mind, Mother? Not give up, Martha corrected gently. Share in a way that allows Lily to develop the gifts that are her birthright, surrounded by the landscape that nurtures them best. And what about her education? Her friends in Portland? Everything familiar to her? I don't have friends in Portland. Mom, Lily said quietly, not real ones. And I get better grades when I'm here with Grandma, because I'm not so. She searched for the right word. Empty inside. Sarah flinched as if struck, turning to her daughter with an expression of genuine hurt. Empty, Lily. I know things have been difficult since your father died, but I've tried. I know you have, Lily interrupted, desperate to make her mother understand. You work so hard and you're always tired, and you never have time to just be with me. Here with Grandma, I don't feel like I'm in the way all the time. I feel like I belong. The raw honesty in her daughter's words seemed to penetrate Sarah's defenses more effectively than all of Martha's talk of family legacies and special connections. She looked from Lily to her mother and back again, her expression troubled. I never meant to make you feel like a burden, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us, working to provide security, making sure you had opportunities I never had. I know, Mom, and I'm not asking to never see you again. Just couldn't I live here most of the time and visit you instead of the other way around? A tense silence settled over the porch as Sarah visibly struggled with the request. Thunder resumed his purring, the rhythmic vibration seeming to offer a counterpoint to the emotional tension between the humans. Finally, Sarah sighed deeply, her shoulders dropping in what might have been resignation or acceptance. I need time to think about this. she said, not quite meeting either Lily's or Martha's eyes. It's a lot to process the wolves this family gift. You're claiming the idea of completely rearranging our lives based on a summer's worth of experiences. Martha nodded, understanding in her gaze. Take all the time you need, but consider watching Lily here in this environment before you decide. Stay a few days. See how she flourishes in these woods in a way that might never be possible in the city. To Lily's surprise, her mother agreed to remain at the cottage until Sunday, 3 full days of observation before making her decision. The arrangement had a clinical quality to it that might have bothered Lily under different circumstances, but now she welcomed any opportunity to demonstrate her connection to Martha's world with or without Timber's physical presence. The first day passed in a whirlwind of activity as Lily eagerly showed her mother every aspect of her life at the cottage. The vegetable garden she helped tend the herb beds, where Martha taught her the medicinal properties of various plants, the chicken coop where she collected eggs each morning, and the small workshop where they prepared remedies and tinctures for their own use and occasionally for neighbors with specific ailments. Sarah watched with a nurse's critical eye, asking pertinent questions about sanitation and dosages when Martha explained her herbal preparations. But Lily noticed her mother's professional skepticism, gradually yielding to genuine interest, especially when Martha demonstrated how certain combinations of herbs had produced measurable results in treating common conditions. Sir, this salve, Sarah acknowledged, examining a small jar of greenish ointment. It's remarkably similar to a prescription product we use for persistent wound healing, but you're saying you make it from plantain yarrow calendula and comfrey primarily. Martha replied, pleased by her daughter's engagement. With a bit of raw honey as a natural antibacterial. My mother taught me the proportions, and her mother taught her, generations of trial and error and careful observation passed down through Callaway women. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thunder suddenly raised his head from his customary spot on the railing, his yellow eyes fixed intently on the forest edge. Lily followed his gaze, her heart leaping at the sight of a familiar silver-gray form moving cautiously from the trees into the meadow. Timber, she whispered, not daring to move lest she frighten him away. The young wolf paused at the transition between forest and meadow, seemingly uncertain of his welcome after his departure that morning. Thunder chirped encouragement, a sound between a meow and a trill that Lily had only heard him use with Timber, as if that were the invitation he needed. Timber trotted forward, crossing the open ground with increasing confidence until he reached the bottom of the porch steps. He came back, Sarah murmured, her voice colored with undisguised wonder. She had heard the story of Timber's return to the wild pack, but had clearly not expected to witness his reappearance so soon. Lily descended the steps, slowly kneeling on the ground to meet Timber at eye level. The wolf approached with a mixture of excitement and new dignity, as if his brief time with the pack had already begun to shape him into something more mature than the playful pup of days past. He pressed his muzzle against her cheek in familiar greeting, then surprised her by gently taking her sleeve between his teeth and tugging. I think he wants you to follow him, Martha observed from the porch. Thunder, go with her, please. The cat leapt gracefully from his perch, landing beside Lily with silent precision. Together, the unlikely trio moved across the yard toward the forest edge, Timber leading and occasionally looking back to ensure they followed Thunder, flanking Lily as if providing escort. Should I go with them? Sarah asked, half rising from her chair. Martha's hand on her arm stopped her. Let Lily show you what she can do, she said quietly. Watch from here. You'll see why this place is where she belongs. At the tree line, Timber stopped, turning to face Lily with an expression of canine seriousness. From the deeper shadows emerged the alpha female, her presence as commanding as it had been that morning. She was followed by one of the adolescent wolves Lily had seen earlier, the younger animal, carrying something in its mouth that was difficult to discern in the fading light. Lily stood perfectly still, Thunder a warm presence against her leg as the alpha approached. The wild wolf sniffed her carefully, seemingly confirming her identity before stepping aside to allow the younger wolf forward. To Lily's astonishment, the adolescent wolf placed its burden at her feet, a small bundle of gray and white fur that moved weakly on the ground. A wolf pup much younger than Timber had been when Thunder first brought him home. Its eyes were open, but its movements were uncoordinated, suggesting it was only a few weeks old. A deep gash along its side had matted the fur with dried blood. An injured pup, Lily called back to the porch, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I think they want us to help it. Can you pick it up? Martha asked, already rising to prepare for a new patient. If the alpha allows Dosanam key. Lily looked to the female wolf, trying to convey her intention through posture and calm energy. The alpha watched her intently, ears forward, before taking a deliberate step backward. Permission granted. With careful hands, Lily lifted the wounded pup, cradling it against her chest. The tiny creature whimpered, but didn't struggle, seeming to sense that help was being offered. As Lily carried the pup back toward the cottage, Timber and the wild wolves did not follow, retreating instead to the safety of the forest. Only Thunder accompanied her, maintaining his protective position at her side until she reached the porch where Martha waited with Sarah. Bring it inside quickly, Martha directed, leading the way to the kitchen where she had already begun assembling her medical supplies. Clean cloths, a basin of warm water, and the herbal salve they had been discussing earlier. Let's see what we're dealing with. Under the bright kitchen light, the pup's injury looked even worse, a deep laceration that must have been made by something sharp, perhaps barbed wire from one of the neighboring properties. The wound was inflamed and beginning to show signs of infection. This will need antibiotics, Sarah said immediately, her nurse's training taking precedence over any lingering skepticism about wildlife rehabilitation. That infection is beyond what herbal remedies can address. Martha nodded agreement. I have some from when Thunder injured his paw last winter. Proper dosage will be tricky given the pup's size. Working together, Sarah with her medical knowledge, Martha with her experience in animal care, and Lily with her gentle touch that kept the frightened pup calm, they cleaned, treated, and bandaged the wound. The tiny wolf accepted their ministrations with surprising cooperation, only whimpering occasionally when the cleaning solution stung the raw flesh. He'll need formula, Martha said when they'd finished treating the wound. He's too young to eat solid food and clearly separated from his mother. She glanced at Lily. The fact that the alpha brought him to us suggests his mother may be dead or unable to care for him. Like Timber, Lily said softly, stroking the pup's head as it nestled against her, exhausted from its ordeal. Like Timber, Martha agreed. Though this one is younger, more vulnerable, he'll need round-the-clock care for several weeks. Sarah, washing her hands at the sink, turned to study the scene, her daughter holding the wolf pup. With natural confidence, her mother preparing formula with the efficiency of someone who had done so many times before. Thunder watching the proceedings from his perch on a kitchen chair. Her expression was complicated, a mixture of professional satisfaction at having helped treat the injury and personal conflict over the situation she found herself in. It was deliberate, wasn't it? She said finally. The alpha bringing the pup to Lily specifically, not to you, mother, but to her. And yes, Martha confirmed simply. The wolves recognized the gift in her, just as they recognized it in me when I was young and in you when you were a child, though you chose to turn away from it. Ikaki. Sarah flinched slightly. I didn't turn away, I just found a different path. A path that served you well, Martha acknowledged without judgment. But Lily's path may be different. The wolves have made their position clear. They trust her. They seek her help. That's not something to dismiss lightly. That night, after the pup had been settled in a warm box in the kitchen and given its first feeding, the 3 generations of Callaway women sat on the porch in the summer darkness. The conversation they'd begun earlier, resuming with new context. Even if I accepted this gift you claim runs in our family, Sarah began choosing her words carefully. That doesn't automatically mean Lily should live here permanently. It's a huge change uprooting her from the life we've built in Portland. A life where she feels empty, Martha reminded her gently, where her natural abilities are constrained rather than nurtured. I could do better, Sarah insisted. Pay more attention, find ways to connect her with nature, even in the city. Parks Nature Center's volunteer work with animals. Lily, who had been listening silently to the adults discuss her future, finally spoke. It's not the same, Mom. In the city, everything's behind fences or glass. Everything's on a schedule with rules about what you can touch and how long you can stay. Here, I can sit under a tree for hours if I want. Watching how the light changes, I can follow Thunder when he shows me something interesting. In the woods, I can hear the whole forest breathing around me. The raw longing in her voice seemed to reach something in Sarah that logical arguments couldn't touch. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her, perhaps seeing for the first time how Lily's entire bearing changed when she spoke of Martha's land, how her face lit with a passion that was rarely evident in Portland. You really love it here that much? Sarah asked softly. More than anywhere, Lily confirmed. It's the only place where I feel like I make sense. Thunder, who had been patrolling the yard perimeter, jumped onto the porch railing with his usual fluid grace. In the faint porch light, his yellow eyes seemed to glow as he regarded the three women with feline inscrutability. From inside the cottage came the faint whimpering of the wolf pup, already forming an attachment to its human caretakers despite its wild origins. And from the forest edge, barely visible in the moonlight, came another sound. A wolf's howl, deep and resonant, answered by several others in complex harmony. Timber's voice, Lily thought now, joining the age-old song of his kind, while still remembering the human family that had sheltered him. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she listened to the wolf's chorus. I hear it now, she whispered almost to herself. After all these years, I finally hear it again. Hear what, Mom? Anton, the voice I followed home that night in the storm. The one I convinced myself I'd imagine. Sarah turned to her mother, something like surrender in her expression. You were right, there was a wolf. It led me home when I was lost, just as Thunder led Timber to Lily when he needed her most. Martha reached across the space between their chairs, taking her daughter's hand. The Calloway women have always found their way back to this land eventually. Sarah, even when the path takes them far away for a time, it's in our blood, this connection to the forest and its creatures. So I can stay? Lily asked, barely daring to hope. Live here with Grandma and help with the new pup and maybe see Timber sometimes when he visits. Sarah took a deep breath, looking out toward the dark forest that had featured in her own childhood, a place she had fled as a young woman, seeking certainty and structure, only to find herself circling back decades later through her daughter's undeniable connection to its mysteries. We'll need to make arrangements, she said finally. School transfers, legal permissions, a schedule for visits. I want updates every day at first, and you'll come to Portland for holidays and some weekends? Really? Lily breathed joy spreading through her chest like warm sunshine. You mean it? Sarah nodded, resignation and acceptance mingling in her expression. This place is in your blood, Lily. Maybe it always has been. I thought I could change that by raising you in the city, but clearly the forest had other plans. Thunder chose that moment to jump from the railing to Lily's lap, purring thunderously as if expressing approval of the decision. From inside the cottage, the wolf pup's whimpers escalated to demanding yips, another feeding due. And from the forest came one final howl, closer this time, as if Timber might be approaching the boundary between his wild home and his human one. Sounds like your needed dandelion, Martha said, smiling at her granddaughter. By creatures of both worlds. Lily rose, feeling the weight of heritage and responsibility and joy settling around her shoulders like a mantle, both burden and blessing. I'll always need you too, Mom, she assured Sarah, bending to hug her tightly. This isn't goodbye. It's just finding where I'm supposed to be right now. As she went inside to tend the hungry pup, Lily glanced back to see her mother and grandmother sitting side by side on the porch. Thunder now between them like a silver guardian bridging generations. The sight filled her with a sense of completion. Three Calloway women, each with her own relationship to the forest mysteries, but all bound by blood and history and love for this land that had sustained their family for generations. And in the distance, Timber's distinctive howl rose once more, reminding her that some bonds transcend the boundaries humans create between wild and tame, between animal and human, between what can be explained and what must simply be felt with an open heart. The guardian of the forest would always watch over her. She knew just as she would always keep faith with the wildness he represented, a promise as old as the ancient trees and as enduring as the Callaway women's legacy of connection to this land and its creatures. Thunder's rumbling purr and the pup's insistent cries called her back to her immediate responsibilities. With a final glance at the dark forest where Timber and his pack roam free, Lily stepped into the warm light of Martha's cottage, ready to embrace her inheritance and the extraordinary path that had chosen her as surely as she had chosen it.